Imagine this. You wake up one day and realize every relationship in your life, your partner, your friends, even your family, is built on a foundation of lies. Not the kind of lies that feel malicious or deliberate, but the quiet, unspoken ones. The lies you tell yourself to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to fit into the roles others expect of you. The lies that say, "I'm fine," when you're not, or "I agree," when you don't. The lies that whisper, "This is love," when it feels more like obligation. What if the very connections that are supposed to bring us joy and meaning are secretly eroding our sense of self? What if the love we crave is often just a mask for our fear of being alone? And what if the truth, raw, unfiltered, and uncomfortable, is the only thing that can save us from this silent betrayal? We live in a world where relationships are often transactional, where we trade authenticity for acceptance, vulnerability for validation. We wear masks to fit in, to be loved, to avoid rejection. But beneath the surface, a quiet tension grows. A voice inside whispers, "This isn't real," and yet we silence it because the truth feels too dangerous, too disruptive. But here's the paradox. The lies we tell to preserve our relationships may be the very thing destroying them. The more we hide, the more we lose ourselves. The more we pretend, the more we starve for something real. So, what happens when the masks slip? What happens when the lies can no longer hold? This is the great question. Are we willing to risk the comfort of the lie for the freedom of the truth? And if not, what are we truly sacrificing? The answer lies not in the relationships themselves, but in the shadows we refuse to face. And that is where we must begin. The lies we tell in relationships are not born out of malice. They are born out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being truly seen. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we bury because it feels too dangerous to confront. We project our insecurities onto others, crafting personas that we believe will make us lovable, acceptable, worthy. But in doing so, we create a chasm between who we are and who we pretend to be. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre understood this intimately. He argued that we live in bad faith, deceiving ourselves to escape the unbearable weight of freedom. We cling to roles: partner, friend, parent, because they give us a sense of identity, a script to follow. But in doing so, we betray our authentic selves. We trade the uncertainty of freedom for the comfort of the familiar, even if it means living a lie. Arthur Schopenhauer took this further, suggesting that human relationships are often driven by need rather than love. We seek others to fill our voids, to soothe our loneliness, to validate our existence. But this neediness breeds dependency, not connection. It creates relationships built on mutual use rather than mutual understanding. And then there's the societal layer. Aldous Huxley warned us about a world where distractions and superficiality keep us from confronting deeper truths. In modern society, we're taught to prioritize harmony over honesty, to avoid conflict at all costs. We're conditioned to believe that love means never rocking the boat. The connection requires compromise, even if that compromise means sacrificing our truth. But here's the hidden cost. Every lie we tell, every mask we wear, distances us from ourselves and others. We become strangers in our own lives, performing roles instead of living them. And the relationships we thought were saving us, they become prisons of our own making. The question is no longer why we lie, it's what we're willing to lose if we don't stop. And that is where the real work begins. The lies we tell in relationships don't just distort our connections, they reshape our very sense of reality. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias and the halo effect blind us to the truth, reinforcing the narratives we've constructed. We see what we want to see, hear what we want to hear, and ignore the cracks in the foundation until they become too wide to ignore. Neurologically, this self-deception takes a toll. The brain craves consistency, so it rewires itself to align with the lies we tell. Over time, the boundary between truth and fiction blurs. We forget who we really are, trading authenticity for the comfort of the familiar. This is why breaking free feels so terrifying. It's not just about confronting others. It's about confronting ourselves. Culturally, we're conditioned to prioritize harmony over honesty. We're taught that love means never rocking the boat. The connection requires compromise, even if that compromise means sacrificing our truth. But this cultural conditioning comes at a cost. Relationships built on lies lack depth and resilience. They crumble under pressure because they were never real to begin with. And then there's the emotional toll. The more we lie, the more we distance ourselves from others. We become isolated in our own minds, trapped in a cycle of performance and pretense. The love we crave remains just out of reach because it's not love at all, it's a transaction, a negotiation, a carefully constructed illusion. But the most insidious consequence is the erosion of self-trust. Every lie we tell chips away at our ability to trust ourselves, to know ourselves. We become strangers in our own lives, performing roles instead of living them. And the relationships we thought were saving us, they become prisons of our own making. The question is no longer why we lie, it's what we're willing to lose if we don't stop. And that is where the real work begins. Breaking free from the lies that bind us requires a radical shift in perspective, one that challenges everything we've been taught about love, connection, and identity. It begins with a simple but profound realization. The truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to freedom. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward integrating our shadow and embracing our authentic selves. It's not easy. It requires courage to face the parts of ourselves we've buried, to confront the fears that have driven us to lie. But in doing so, we reclaim our power. We stop living for others and start living for ourselves. Jean-Paul Sartre offered another key insight. We must embrace the discomfort of freedom. This means letting go of the roles we've clung to, the scripts we've followed, and stepping into the uncertainty of authenticity. It means saying, "This is who I am," even when it feels terrifying, even when it risks rejection. Practical steps can guide this rebellion. Start by identifying the lies you tell both to yourself and others. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I hiding? Then practice radical honesty, not as a weapon, but as a tool for connection. Share your fears, your desires, your truths. You'll be surprised how often others respond in kind. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, taught us that meaning comes from within. When we stop seeking validation from others and start living in alignment with our values, we find a deeper, more enduring sense of connection. Relationships built on truth are not always easy, but they are real. And in their reality lies their strength. This is the rebellion, to choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, freedom over fear. It's a revolution that begins within and ripples outward, transforming not just our relationships, but our lives. The question is no longer why we lie, it's whether we're brave enough to stop. And that is where the real transformation begins. The ultimate truth is this: the lies we tell in relationships are not just about others, they are about ourselves. They are a mirror reflecting our deepest fears, our unmet needs, our longing for connection. But here's the revelation: the love we seek cannot be found in the approval of others. It can only be found within. This is the paradox of authenticity. The more we try to earn love by hiding, the more we push it away. The more we embrace our truth, the more we attract relationships that honor it. It's not about being perfect or universally liked. It's about being real. And in that reality lies a power we've never known. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. This is the price of freedom, the courage to stand alone, to risk rejection, to face the void. But it is also the reward. When we stop lying, we stop living in fear. We stop performing and start existing. We stop seeking validation and start creating meaning. And in doing so, we discover a love that is not conditional, not transactional, but deeply, profoundly real. The final realization is this: the truth is not a threat to love, it is its foundation. The relationships that survive our honesty are the ones worth keeping. The ones that don't were never real to begin with. So, ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped lying? If you stopped hiding? If you stepped into the fullness of who you are? The answer is not just a relationship, it's a revolution, a reclamation of your soul. And that is where true connection begins.